Long before D-Day, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, or the Battle of Stalingrad, there was another war. This one fought between the Japanese and the Soviets. Known as the Russo-Japanese War, it was fought in northern China, the Korean Peninsula, and Mongolia. Among these battles and border skirmishes was the Battle of Khalkhin, history's forgotten battle. Welcome to Jack Attempts History, where today we're going to be talking about the Battle of Khalkhin. Warning, a lot of the words and names in this video are in other languages, so I might get some pronunciations wrong. On June 1st, 1939, Russian cavalry commander Georgy Zhukov was summoned to Moscow. He feared that due to Stalin's purge of the Red Army, the Great Terror of Trotsky fascist spies, and the fact that he had already been warned once, he was being sent to go through the vicious meat grinder of interrogations put out by Stalin's secret police, the NKVD. However, when he arrived in Moscow and met with the People's Commissioner of Defense, Marshal Clement Voroshov, he was surprised. Their meeting probably went something a little like this.
Sir, you wanted to see me?
Yes, please have a seat. You're being sent out to Outer Mongolia to take command of the 57th Special Corps.
So I'm not going to be interrogated?
No.
And I'm not going to be sent to a labor camp?
No.
Why me?
Stalin wants to put an end to Japanese provocations in Mongolia and hopefully prepare for attack in the West by Hitler. Not to mention Japan's signing of the Anti-Comintern Pact with Germany.
Okay, thank you, sir.
That'll be all. The Japanese were also angry at the USSR's support of China, not only with money, but also T-26 tanks, military advisors, and volunteer air squadrons. They were also getting mad at Hirohito's reluctance to allow them to respond to the Soviets. Due to this, the Khalkhin army, which was in the area at the time, allowed their commander to act on the spot without informing Tokyo. This, combined with already high amount of border skirmishes in the area, led to the Battle of Khalkhin, or the Nomonhan Incident as it's known to the Japanese. The battle began on May 12, 1939 on a Mongolian river called Khalkhin. It was fought between Russian troops, Russian-backed Mongolian troops, and Japanese soldiers. It began when a Mongolian cavalry regiment crossed the river, which the Japanese regarded as the border, and advanced some 20 kilometers to the nearby village of Nomonhan, which the Mongolians saw as the border. They hoped to graze their horses on the wide steppe. I guess you could say that the start of the Battle of Khalkhin was a grazing. Manchurian forces from the previously mentioned Khalkhin army pushed them back to the goal, where back-and-forth skirmishing continued for 2 weeks until the Red Army called in reinforcements. On May 28th, Red Army forces destroyed a Japanese force of around 200 men and armored cars. From there, things escalated quickly. Red Army units received reinforcements from the Trans-Baikal Military District, and the Japanese sent both the 23rd Division of Lieutenant General Komatsubara Michitaro and part of the 7th Division to the front lines. The Kwantung Army also demanded an increase of air presence to support its troops. This quickly caused concern in Tokyo, and an order was issued banning all retaliatory strikes by aircraft. This news caused Kwantung commanders to rush to finish the operation. On the morning of June 27th, Japanese air squadrons launched attacks on Soviet bases in Outer Mongolia. Upon hearing the news, officials in Tokyo dispatched a series of orders banning all further air activity. During the night of July 1st, Japanese troops stormed across the Khalkhin and seized a strategic hill which was threatening the Soviet flank. However, after 3 days of heavy fighting, Zhukov was able to force them back across the river during a counterattack by his tanks. He then occupied part of the eastern bank and began to plot his great deception.
While Zhukov was secretly preparing for a major offensive, his troops gave the impression of preparing a static defensive line. He sent badly encrypted messages demanding building materials, broadcast the noise of pile drivers on loudspeakers, and distributed pamphlets titled, "What the Soviet Soldier Must Know in Defense." These deceptive tactics kept the Japanese from building up any major defenses and left them open to large attacks.
On July 23rd, the Japanese attacked again head-on, but failed to break through the Soviet lines. Their own supply problems kept them from launching a third major attack. However, they were blissfully unaware that Zhukov's force had now increased to 58,000 soldiers, backed by 500 tanks and 250 aircraft. At 5:45 a.m. on Sunday, August 20th, Zhukov finally launched his huge surprise attack. It opened with a 3-hour artillery bombardment, then with tanks, aircraft, infantry, and cavalry. While the rifle and paratrooper divisions of the Soviet infantry held down the bulk of the Japanese forces in the center of the line, Zhukov sent 3 armored brigades and cavalry around the back to begin encircling movements. Zhukov's tanks included T-26s, which had been used during the Spanish Civil War, and an early prototype of the T-34, the most effective medium tank of World War II. The out-of-date and obsolete Japanese tanks never stood a chance, especially because they lacked armor-piercing shells. However, not everything was going well for the Soviets. During that time, it was said to have reached over 40 degrees centigrade, or 104 degrees Fahrenheit, and the smoke and dust from explosions was said to have obscured the battlefield, clogged cannons, and clogged machine guns. The Japanese, despite lacking proper anti-tank guns, continued to fight on. Kwantung Lieutenant Sadakaji was supposedly seen charging a tank with a samurai sword until he was cut down. Japanese soldiers fought from earth bunkers, inflicting heavy casualties on the Soviets. In some cases, the Soviets had to bring out flamethrower tanks to deal with them. Despite their determination, the Kwantung Army's outdated tactics and weapons led to a humiliating defeat. Komatsubaru's forces were almost completely destroyed in what was basically a massacre. They lost over 61,000 men, while the Soviets only lost about 8,000. By the morning of August 31st, the battle was over. A few minor skirmishes continued in the area, but Stalin saw it in his best interest to agree to a Japanese ceasefire. This small battle in Mongolia had a major effect on World War II for 3 main reasons. Number 1, the Japanese Strike North faction, which wanted war against the Soviet Union, ended up losing to the Japanese Strike South faction, which wanted to take over French, British, and Dutch colonies. This prompted the Japanese to attack islands in the Pacific and eventually battle with the United States. Number 2, this prompted the signing of a Soviet-Japanese non-aggression pact to Berlin's dismay in April 1941, just weeks before Operation Barbarossa, Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union. And finally, number 3. This led to the Japanese decision not to open up a second front and invade the Soviet Union while Germany was invading in the West. This is important because Hitler's defeat in the hands of the Soviet Union was one of the final major turning points of the war. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe.